Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin. Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah. We begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity for us to continue in our lesson in Al-Mantiq, to speak about the Sullam of Al-Imam Al-Akhdari, and we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with the understanding, and may Allah make this lesson a reason where our sins are forgiven, our prayers are answered, and may Allah bless us with tawfiq and hidayah, and protect us from all difficulties, trials and tribulations in dunya and akhirah. Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen. So inshallah, for today, before we enter into our slides, just a recap of what we mentioned in our last lesson. In our last lesson, we are still speaking about the types of definitions, namely al-had, rasm, and lafzi. So I spent some time to explain the meaning of had, the meaning of rasm, the meaning of lafzi, and the difference between had and rasm. And al-had is divided into two parts, and we have had the tam, and we have had an-naqis. And likewise, pertaining to rasm, we have rasm tam and rasm naqis. So let us go through this again. When we speak about al-had, we are speaking about making a definition based on jins and fasl. Jins and fasl. So in English, they call it genus and differentia. And both of these two elements, as what I mentioned many times, it explains the essence of the particular thing that is defined. So for example, if you define any human being, you say human being al-insan al-hayawanu natiq. Al-hayawan, this is the class or the genus which human beings is under the class of living things or beings. And then we have an-natiq, this is the thing that differentiate human beings from the rest of the members of the same class, that is the class of al-hayawan. So this is an example of differentia, the thing that differentiates a particular thing from the rest of the members. And both of these two elements explains the essence of that particular thing. So a good definition is a definition that define the essence of the thing that is prescribed. So for example, if you want to define any cars, or you want to define even what you call it, any other things, definition, every single word has definition. Every single word has definition, and if it carries a meaning, then it is defined. So when we look at things around us, we are what you call it, in a situation where we see many things around us. We see trees and human beings and animals, even any thoughts, even in various sciences, for example, even in Islam, all we see terminologies and the meaning of things and definitions of things. And this is where Allah mentioned in the Quran, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. Allah inspired Adam alayhi salam that he is able to have the knowledge of al-asma, the name of things and their definition. The name of things and their definition. So basically the knowledge of the Mantiq, the first part is about tasawwur. And tasawwur, the reason why we study the chapter of tasawwur, the purpose is to understand how are we able to define, and how are we able to distinguish between a good definition and a bad definition. So here in this particular chapter that we are in, basically the author is speaking about how we differentiate a correct definition from a false definition, and a proper definition from an improper definition. So when it comes to the had, this is what is the correct form of definition. So whenever we want to define something, we always have to look for two things. So all this thing always we have to remember. We have to understand the meaning of the genus, from which genus does this particular thing belongs to, and what is the near genus. Last week also I mentioned the difference any between near genus, middle genus, and far genus. So when it comes any to insan, the near genus is hayawan, the middle genus is jism, yani a body, and the far genus is jawhar, that is a substance. So insan comes any from hayawan, hayawan any is part any of a body, any a living any body, jism, and jism any comes any from a part any of substance. Yani every body any is a substance. Likewise, every living thing any is a body. So because any these are the genus. So we have any the near genus, and we have the middle genus and the far genus. So a correct any form of definition, when we speak about genuses, we have to use the near genus. So when we define any human beings, we say al-insan huwa al-hayawan. Straight away any we go into the near genus, and we cannot be saying al-insan huwa al-jismun natiq. Although the meaning is correct, but in terms any of definition, there is a shortcoming. We call it, this is al-haddun naqis. Al-haddun naqis, yani a definition that has any a shortcoming, a naqs. What is the reason? The reason is because we are using a further genus instead of using the near genus. So al-haddun naqis is when we use a further genus than the near genus. And likewise, when it comes into rasm, we have rasmut tam, and rasmut tam is basically when you use any genus followed by an attribute that is specific to the thing that you define. So for example, any human beings, you say al-hayawanu dahik, al-hayawanu dahik. So here we have the word dahik. Dahik is basically someone who has the ability to laugh, or a person is laughing. And there are two things here. One is bil quwa and one is bil fi'l. So when you say al-hayawanu dahik, meaning he has the ability to laugh. He has the ability to laugh. It doesn't mean that he is laughing. So when he is laughing, we say this is bil fi'li. But if you say bil quwa, meaning he has the ability to laugh. And laughter is not part of the essence. Now this is the thing. This is the thing I need to differentiate between al-had and rasm. When we speak about al-had, we speak about essences. But when we go back into rasm, it is genus and accident. Genus and accident. We call it al-khas, correct? No? This is any part of asma, what you call it, kuliyatul khamsa. Al-khas, and we have al-am. But here, when it comes into rasm, it is genus and khas. It's jins and khas. So there is such thing as al-had al-naqis and haddut tam, rasmul tam and rasmul naqis. Rasmul tam and rasmul naqis. Rasmul tam is when we use a near genus instead of a far genus. Same thing as what we speak about al-had. So for example, if I say al-insan huwa al-jismun dahik, this is rasmun naqis. Because I'm using a further genus. So if I say al-insan huwa al-hayawanu dahik, now this is rasmut tam. This is a correct form of rasm. A correct form of rasm, meaning I'm using the near genus, and I'm using what? I'm using an attribute or an accident that is specific to insan, that is the ability to laugh, ad-dahik. Taib. If for example, I do not mention the genus, and I just mention the attribute, I say al-insan huwa ad-dahik. Now this is rasmun naqis. So rasmun naqis is either I use a far genus, or I do not mention the accident, or I do not mention the attribute or the accident, or afwan, I do not mention the genus, afwan. I do not mention the genus. I only mention the attribute. I say al-insan huwa ad-dahik, and this is rasmun naqis. So rasmun naqis, either I use a far genus, or I didn't use any genus at all. Just the accident or the attribute. Now this is a rasmun naqis. So we have haddul tam and haddul naqis. We have rasmut tam and rasmun naqis. Correct or not? So under this we have all these examples. Al-haddul tam, again we are speaking about near genus and fasl. Near genus and fasl, and it goes back and speak about essence. And then al-haddu naqis, the shortcoming of al-had, and is when you use a far genus. That's when, and you have the haddu naqis, the parable of saying al-jismu al-natiq, al-insanu wa jismu natiq. This is haddu naqis. And then any rasmu tam, yani is to use any a genus, a near genus, and al-khas, yani an accident, any that is specific, any to the thing, any that is defined. This is rasmu tam, and rasmu naqis is using any of our genus, or not mentioning genus any at all, just mentioning the accident, any, or we say attribute any of that particular thing. As for lafzi is basically, it is a kind of synonym. Yani you just place any the word. And for example, if person asks you what is the meaning any of a lion, you say a lion yani is a beast. Any for example, lion yani is a beast. So this is any what you call it, words any that carry any about the same meaning. A good example any will be, for example, any what is the meaning any of beautiful? We say attractive. What is any the definition of beautiful? It is attractive. And you just basically use any a synonym. Yeah, any something, some words any that carry any the same meaning. And this is any the lowest point any of definition. Yeah, any that we should not be concerned any about, and it's just any about any understanding any things. But to get any good definition, we have to go to al-haddu tam. This is the thing. We have any to go back any to al-hudud, the had. So that is why when we study religious any sciences and whatever knowledge any that we study, always any look out any for a proper definition, because a proper definition any will make you able any to think correctly, so that you don't make mistake any in thinking, so that you don't. And this is any the first way to understanding arguments. The first any path any to understanding any arguments and is to understand any good definitions. So all this time any we are speaking any about are basically yani the purpose any is basically any to understand about good definitions. And good definitions any is one of the most any important any chapters any in Mantiq. In logic any it is about understanding definitions. And please understand this. And before any we go any to speak about arguments and how to differentiate any between good and bad reasoning and arguments, the first thing any we have to understand any the definition of the word that is used any in the statement. Just like any when we say for example, prayers any is wajib, or prayers any is obligatory. Prayers any is obligatory. This is a statement. In order for us any to understand the statement, and you have to understand the individual definitions any of the components any of the words made up any in that statement. So we have as-salatul wajiba. What is the meaning any of salah here? What is any the definition any of salah? So we have any definition any in terms any of the Arabic language. We have any definitions any in terms any of the Sharia. We have any definitions any in terms of urfiyah, yani the common practice any of people. So when we speak about Islam, you have always need to go back into the definition between Sharia, not yani al-lughawiyya. Lughawiyya is basically to assist. The meaning in the Arabic language is basically to assist you yani in understanding the definition and to understand the connection between ta'rif Shari and ta'rif and lughawi. The definition of the Sharia and definition of the Arabic language. But what is important is to understand definitions based on that particular subject. So since we are in the, for example, speaking about the Sharia, so prayers when we define in prayers ulama mention al-af'alu wal-aqwalu al-muftatahatu bi-takbiri wal-mukhtatamatu bi-taslimi. What you call it? They mentioned that it is words and actions that are begun by the takbir and that ended by the salam. And this is an example of a definition. And in every chapter, for example, when we speak about tahara, for example, raful hadath, or izalatul najas, or ma fi ma'nahuma, or suratihima. The definition of saum. As-saum luratan al-imsak. Istilahan al-imsaku anil mufattirat. Yani, it is to saum is basically to abstain from things that breaks the fast with intentions and so on and so forth. So the benefits of learning Mantiq, when you understand about the importance of definitions and how to make any definitions and how to differentiate good definitions from bad any definition, the benefit is that you are able to learn properly and to think properly. This is the thing. Type for our lesson today, inshallah. Now we go back to our slides. I really have not edited this thing. So here is the part anywhere the author was speaking about al-haddu naqis and rasmu naqis or haddu tam and rasmu tam. So he say wa naqisul haddi bi faslin aw ma'a jinsin ba'idin la qaribin ma'a. Yani wa naqisul hadd in haddu naqis is bi faslin ma'a jinsin ba'id. Jinsin ba'id and is a far genus. That's what we mentioned, not any jinsin qarib. Now, all this I mentioned earlier. Okay. Okay, now when we go on to the next one. Yani he mentioned وَنَاقِسُ رَسْمِي بِخَاصَةٍ فَقَطْ أَوْ مَعَ جِنْسٍ أَبْعَدْ قَدْ ارْتَبَطْ. Yani this is haddu rasm naqis. He said بِخَاصَةٍ فَقَطْ. Either it is defined as using an accident, yani the specific any accident or attribute without any mentioning the jins. That's what I mentioned. Aw ma'a jinsin ab'an qad irtabat, or we use any of our genus and then with the attribute. So this is also considered as rasmun naqis. Then he mentioned wama bi lafzin ladayhim shuhira tabdilu lafzin bi radifin ashhara. So this is anything about synonym. The third part is definition and based on lafzi, and this is based on synonym. We just use any synonym to replace any that particular word to explain the meaning. This is the meaning of lafzi. This also I have explained. Okay, now this is today's lesson basically. Now the author is going to speak about the condition. The condition of the definition. So he said, and we have reached Bait 45. He said, وَشَرْطُ كُلٍّ, the conditions of the definitions, أَنْ يُرَى مُضْطَرِدًا مُنْعَكِسًا وَظَاهِرًا لَا أَبْعَدًا. So these are some conditions here. If you look at the words here, you have the word number one, مُضْطَرِدًا, and then you have مُنْعَكِسًا. مُضْطَرِدًا and mun'akisa. What is the meaning of the meaning of mutarida? In another words, our ulama they use the word mani'. Mani'. When you define something, it has to be specific. It cannot be something that is general, that is shared by other things. Then your definition has a shortcoming. Then your definition has a shortcoming. So the definition must be encompassing, and there must be something that differentiate it from other things. So this is the meaning of muttaridan mun'akisa. So muttarida it does not let those that are not within that definition to enter into the definition, whereas mun'akisa it includes what you call it, it includes the thing that is defined. So by having something that includes and something that defines, then you can be specific to understand the definition that you are aiming at. So let me give you the simple example of the definition of al-insan. To understand, actually this is something easy. By examples, inshallah, hopefully it becomes easier. Now, if you look at the definition of al-insan, we say the definition is al-hayawan al-natiq. So al-hayawan here, this is jami'. Al-hayawan is jami'. What is the meaning of jami'? It is universal. Hayawan, insan is from the class of hayawan. So when it comes into jins, It is universal, correct or not? This is when we spoke about last time, when we spoke about kulliyah. Al-kull yani wal-kulliyah. So the scholars of Mantiq any they are concerned any about this concept any of universal and particular. So when comes any to jami', that is any munakis, yani it is something that is universal. So when you say al-insan huwa al-hayawan, correct or not? For example, if I put a full stop, what happens? I say al-insan huwa al-hayawan, full stop. Is this any, what happens any to this kind of definition? If I were to say al-insan huwa al-hayawan, now this is a shortcoming. Why? Because al-hayawan is a universal any concept that has many members. So it includes human beings, it includes animals, yani it includes yani all kinds any of living things. So there are many any members. There is nothing any that mani' yamna'. There is nothing any that prevent the other members any from entering into its definition. So the first thing any is together. The second thing any is to differentiate. So that is why any we have any the fossil. So we say al-insanul hayawan. Insan yani is al-hayawan, which is correct. Yani is part any of living things. Taib, what is any the thing that differentiate yani insan any from the rest any of the members? Now this is the thing which is mani'. So definitions any that it must be jami', it encompass, and it must be mani', yani it removes, and it removes any those who are not any within that definition. So if you are able any to do these two things, then you are able any to get any the correct any definition. Because otherwise, if you were to say al-insan huwa al-hayawan, now this is not specific, because all the other members any of the same class any are included, and this is not a correct form of definition. But if you only have what you call a fossil any only, it is also any a shortcoming any, because you do not any mention any the genus. You do not any mention any genus. You do not any include the class any of what this particular thing any is from. That is also any a shortcoming. So both things any must be there. One is mutarida, that's what the author any mentioned. The other one is munakisa. So munakisa, in other words, it is jami', it is encompassing, and mutarida, it is mani', yani it is specific and it removes those any who are not any within any that definition. So this is any the first condition. The first condition any is that it is mutarida. The second condition is munakisa. So mutarida is mani', munakisa yani is jami'. And then it must also, number 3, zahir. It must be clear. It must be clear. La ab'ad, yani not something yani that people yani cannot understand. So definitions yani has to be clear. Yani what is an example? And for example, yani we say definition is not clear, meaning any just need to mention the genes any only, or just need to mention the fossil any only. So if you do so, then it is not clear. If you do so, it is not clear. Just like any when we say, for example, al-insan wal hayawan, it is not clear. So people any might be wondering any what kind of hayawan any is this? Or you say al-insan any huwa natiq. Yani you say al-insan any is something any that possess what you call it, any the intellect. This is also any a shortcoming, and it bring about any questions as to what any this definition any is speaking about. So it must be clear and free any from ambiguity. It must be clear and free any from ambiguity. So I mentioned the conditions any of definitions are that they must be encompassing and conditional, clear in its meaning and not vague. Not vague any meaning, and it is not something that is any difficult, yani to be any understood. And then any the next one, wala musawiyan. It cannot be something any that is musawi. For example, if we ask any, for example, what is the meaning of something that moves? What is any the meaning any something any that moves? Yani a person is say any, for example, something that moves means something that is not as still. Yani it's basically the same thing. Correct? And not just any a twist any of words. Now this is not any a proper, it's not any a proper definition, because any it leads any to the same thing. It leads any to the same thing. So a person asks any what is knowledge? Knowledge is something that is known. Now this is not correct. This is not correct, and because you are not explaining anything. You are not explaining the genus, and there is no differentia, there is no fossil. This is not yani al-had. This is not any correct any form any of, not any correct form of definition. So it must not yani bring about any the same thing. It must not any bring about any the same thing. It has to be explain any the essence any of that particular thing, and it has to be specific any to that particular thing. Wala tajawuzan, it must not be metaphorical. It must not any be metaphorical bila qarinatin, yani without any evidence. Without any evidence any then that explains. For example, any if a person say who is an alim, what is any the meaning any of a knowledgeable man? Yani we say al-alim huwa al-bahr. Al-alim yani huwa al-bahr. Yani a knowledgeable man is the sea. Yani this is metaphorical. And but what any actually this person is saying, for example, his knowledge and is like any the sea. His knowledge and is like the sea. But just any using the sea any like that and full stop, people any cannot get what any is meant, because this carries a metaphorical meaning. Any unless any you have any evidence. Unless any you have any an evidence. Yani for example, any you say al-alim yani huwa al-bahrul mufakkir. Yani you say for example, a knowledgeable person yani is an ocean that thinks. Now any people know, oh, he's speaking about a person. But any if you say al-alim wal bahr, and people might be thinking that al-alim and maybe any has got something any to do any with the ocean or with the water or something like that. So when it comes into metaphorical meanings, any they must always any be equipped any by qarina. In Arabic any we call it qarina. So he said wala tajawuzan bila qarinatin biha taharraza. Yani it must be similar to the defined and not carry metaphorical meanings without any evidence, any to explain. And then any the next part, any he said wala bima yudra bimahdudin wala mushtarikin minal qarinati khala. Yani part any of the condition, and it must not be secular. Yani circular. Yani it goes back any to the same thing, just like any how any we mentioned any earlier, that it must not bring about any the same meaning, because otherwise it does not give benefit, and it must not bring back any to the same thing. And for example, if you ask what is knowledge, knowledge is something that is known. So something that is known comes any from knowledge. So it is a circular. It is like any a circle. Like in English, we call it beating around the bush. Beating any around the bush, any, yani we are using any the same word that is derived to explain any that particular word. So if you use any the same word any that is derived any from a particular word any to define it, now this is the meaning of dawr. Yani this is any a circular kind any of explanation which does not give any much, which does not any gives much any benefit. So I mentioned here it must not be, for now there is a mistake. It must not any be circulatory. Circulatory. It is defined or using any a word that carry many meanings. Yani there are certain any meanings any then, certain words any that carry many meanings. And for example, in Arabic any the word ayn. The word any ayn. Ayn any can mean eyes, ayn any can mean spy, ayn any can mean water. Ayn and it can mean what you call it essence. So if you define any something and you use ayn, and for example you say what is shams, what is any the sun, you say the sun is al-ayn. Now this word and it has many any meanings, so you have any to define properly. You have any to define any properly, and you have any to add in any the evidences to ascertain that what any you are speaking about is a particular type any of ayn, because any these are words any that has any many meanings. So definitions any basically it must be clear, it must be jami and mani, it must be wadih. Number one, any the author speaks about it must encompass and it must specify, and then it must any be clear, and it must not have metaphorical meanings. How many conditions already? We have 4 already. And it must not be circulatory. Any 5. and it must not have words any that has many meanings any without any evidences, because any it can lead to confusion as to what any you are referring to. So all these are basically the conditions any of definitions. And lastly, and he said, wa indahum min jumlatil mahdud an tudkhilal ahkamu an tadkhulal ahkamu fil hudud. Another thing any that we cannot do in definitions is you should not any put in rulings in definitions. For example, if a person asks you what is the meaning of as-salah, you say as-salatu hiya al-ibadatul wajibah. Yani a prayer is an act that is obligatory. Now this is wrong. This is not a definition. This is a hukum. So rulings should not any be included in definition. So definition any again it has to be clear, and it has to be encompassing and specific and all these things any that we mention. And then lastly he said wala yajuzu fil hududi dhikru aw, and you cannot add any word or in definition, because it shows that you are not firm, that you have doubt. It shows that it is not clear. So for example, you cannot be saying al insanu huwa al hayawanun natiq aw dahik. So what you call it, the word any aw cannot any be used any in hudud, but it can any be used any in rasam, any because rasam any speaks any about attributes, and attributes any are many, accidents any are many. So alhamdulillah, any by this any we have ended any the chapter any of tasawwur. Inshallah, in our next lesson we will enter into babun fil qadaya wa ahkamiha, and this is any the most any important any chapters any in Mantiq, that we will go any into speaking any about propositions and also syllogism and qiyas. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us any of tawfiq. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.